This is the end of the beginning. Welcome to today's show. What better way to create a mass genocide than to do what they have planned to do? Now, most of us, when we think of mass genocide, we think of things that we've been told in history of how rulers have killed people, innocent people, have killed people that they deemed enemies of their kingdoms or their empires. We've heard all these things about genocide, right? And of course, we know Christians are a target of those things. But in this case, the target for this genocide, of course, is all of humanity. And who are the people behind it? All of the global elites. And how are they going to do it? Well, most of the time we think of what? We think of a nuclear weapon. We think of enslavement. Or they could just convince a really stupid society to do this. Now, I don't claim to be a scientist, and I know that most people who identify as Democrats or liberals in this society actually think that they're educated and actually always, what do they spew to us? Believe in science, trust in science, right? Even though, of course, the science tells us that, men can't have babies and things like that they want to disagree with. Well, here's a perfect example of how stupid our society is. We have Bill Gates, Joe Biden, and the United States government. Of course, Bill Gates is involved because anytime you're talking about depopulating humanity, Bill Gates just seems to pop his head up. And maybe it's because he got some pies smashed in his face a couple of decades ago and he's still bitter about it.
Police and security guards in Belgium were caught flat-footed today by a cowardly sneak attack on one of the world's wealthiest men. The target was Microsoft chairman Bill Gates, arriving for a meeting with community leaders. Watch what happens when a team of hitmen meet him first with a pie in the face. Gates was momentarily and understandably shaken, but he was not injured. The hit squad piled on with two more pies before one of them was wrestled to the ground and arrested. The others, for at least the moment, got away. Gates went inside, wiped his face clean, and made no comment. He then went ahead with his scheduled meeting. No word on the motive for this attack.
But he should have worse than that shoved in his face at this point. But Bill Gates, the world government, all these people are working on, with your tax money, a carbon vacuum. So people hear that and they're like, that sounds great. We could get all the pollution out of the air, right? We could suck up carbon dioxide right out of the air. And they'll go along with it because they're that stupid and they'll think it's a great idea. But what they don't realize is that carbon dioxide is needed for plants to survive. Okay? So plants can't survive without carbon dioxide. Thus, not only can plants not survive, you won't be able to, or we as humans won't be able to grow food, which works to their advantage, right? Because they plan on making food in laboratories that have no nutritional value, that'll weaken you, of course, will kill off your testosterone because they'll be jammed with estrogen, and everybody will end up just sick and dying, so that works, right? But people don't use common sense and say, okay, so the government wants to block the sun. That's one thing I've covered, right? The other thing they want to do is vacuum out carbon dioxide. Plants need carbon dioxide to survive. And wait for it, drum roll, for anybody out there that doesn't understand basic science, photosynthesis, any of that stuff in school you might have not paid attention to that actually does make sense and matter, which is actual science that they don't teach anymore. Plants need carbon dioxide to survive. Humans need plants to survive because there's no oxygen. You know, the thing you breathe, there's none of that without plants. It's basic science.
Plants come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. They live in all areas of the earth, from lush tropical rainforests to icy tundras. Plants also live on and in water. Plants are organisms that produce their own food through photosynthesis. In order to carry out this process, they need sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. They take in the water they need through their roots. They get the carbon dioxide they need from the air. The air enters the leaves through tiny holes called the stomata. The food produced during photosynthesis is transported throughout the plant, where it is used as energy to carry out life processes. Plants also need a place to grow. The place a plant grows, called its environment, must provide with all of the things it needs to live, grow, and reproduce.
So they want to remove carbon dioxide. That's really convenient, right? And all these people are going to hear this and they're going to be like, that's not the same thing. They're talking about smoke coming out of pipes from factories, because that's all they show you when these people talk. And they talk about, well, this is how we'll combat climate change. This is how we'll get to net zero carbon emissions. And they don't tell you that, well, plants actually need carbon dioxide in the air to survive. They leave that part out. And then when suddenly you start realizing that people are dying off, that we're depleting our society of actual oxygen, which is really, other than food and water, the only thing humans need, right? And you start seeing people getting sick or having oxygen issues, and you start saying to yourself, wait a minute, well, plants need carbon dioxide. And wait, on top of all that, they're burning all of these trees. So these same people who claim to be environmentalists aren't really environmentalists. They're burning trees down all around the world and blaming it on the climate. You know, trees that suck in carbon, right? So you wouldn't need a carbon vacuum because trees suck in carbon dioxide. Plants suck in carbon dioxide, and then they feed off of it and they make oxygen so we can live. So it's all needed. Carbon is needed. But the carbon they want to eliminate, of course, is you. But let's take a look at big corporations like Coca-Cola and Microsoft and Bill and all of these psychopaths who want to take carbon dioxide out of the air.
The Biden administration is kickstarting the U.S. carbon removal industry. The Department of Energy announced a $1.2 billion investment to suck carbon dioxide out of the air. The money will fund 2 new direct air capture hubs in Texas and Louisiana. Huge vacuum cleaners will be built to suck up carbon dioxide from the air and store it underground. The Department of Energy says this plan could remove the equivalent of nearly 500,000 gas cars off the road a year.
In Squamish, British Columbia, there's a company that wants to stop climate change by sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
One of our plants does the work of 40 million trees.
We have the lowest capital cost and energy cost of any of the CO2 capture from atmosphere solutions.
We're starting to enter commercial markets.
It's called carbon engineering, and it uses a combination of giant fans and complex chemical processes to remove CO2 from the air in a procedure known as direct air capture.
We have such a huge problem with CO2 already in the atmosphere that if we have a mechanism to collect it at large scale, it will give us so much more flexibility in addressing climate change. And we'll start to address all of those emissions that occurred yesterday, the day before, all the way back into the industrial age.
The company is backed by Bill Gates, as well as the oil giants Chevron, BHP, and Occidental. It's received more funding than any other direct air capture company, and it just announced plans to partner with Occidental to build its first commercial plant. But not everyone is excited.
Partnering with an oil company is absolutely a step in the wrong direction.
You're not stopping the fossil fuel industry, you're actually promoting it.
So we've got a bunch of equipment around us here that collectively process atmospheric air and pull the carbon dioxide out.
Basically, carbon engineering's process involves using large fans to pull in atmospheric air through a device called a contactor. After that, it's just chemistry. The air gets sent through a honeycomb structure upon which a liquid solution of chemicals is constantly raining down on. Some of the CO2 molecules in the air stick to that liquid, and the resulting solution is processed in a few more chemical steps to form calcium carbonate pellets, which are heated at very high temperatures to release pure carbon dioxide, which can then be stored underground or used to create products like fuels. All the chemicals in the process are recycled, so the cycle can repeat. Carbon engineering's pilot plant is currently powered by a mix of natural gas and clean electricity, and the CO2 generated from combustion is captured. Eventually, though, the company plans to run fully on renewable electricity. While previously, direct air capture was thought to be too expensive to be a viable option, Carbon Engineering published research last June that revealed its process would cost between $94 and $232 per ton of CO2 captured, a steep decrease from the industry's prior estimate of $600 per ton. This led to renewed interest in the tech, especially after the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, released its special report on global warming last October, which stated that some form of carbon dioxide removal would be necessary to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius and thereby avoid the worst effects of climate change.
We were actually assessing a lot of different pathways to reach 1.5 degrees C, but none of them could actually reach the temperature target without removing CO2 from the atmosphere. Each year that we wait, we actually making ourselves more dependent on carbon removal.
Direct air capture is one of only a handful of technologies that can permanently take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
This is like a giant vacuum cleaner for the atmosphere, and it could be one answer to slashing Earth's carbon emissions.
We take it out of the air, so we reverse climate change.
This system is cleaning up some of the 33 billion tons of carbon dioxide that humans will release into the atmosphere by the end of the year. And the International Energy Agency says it's the highest concentration ever. Companies are increasingly facing pressure from consumers and investors to reduce their carbon footprints. So some are turning to the carbon capture industry that's forecasted to be worth approximately $15 billion by 2027. Microsoft and Audi are investing in this technology, while Coca-Cola is purchasing the carbon that's caught.
We believe it's one of the solutions to fight climate change.
But some climate experts doubt the technology can have a meaningful impact on the environment.
Probably one of the biggest challenges here is having captured it, what can you do with it?
We visit one of the largest open-air carbon capture facilities on the planet to see how it absorbs then sells its CO2 and how that could help companies become cleaner. A lot of companies are trying to remove carbon dioxide from the air. Some want to capture it directly by attaching filters on trucks and factories, or by installing ventilation systems in meeting rooms.
Here we basically have air being pumped inside this chamber.
But Climeworks takes carbon dioxide directly out of the atmosphere.
We blow air through this collector using a ventilator. The CO2 sticks inside this box and stays there.
Natalie Casas leads Climeworks' research program. She says this facility is made up of 30 ventilators that can pull in about 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere every year.
Inside the collector, we have a filter material. This filter material is able to catch CO2.
Casas says the biggest challenge is making it affordable to set up and use. Building and installing just one of these ventilators here at this facility costs as much as $220,000. And it also needs a lot of electricity. So to clean up the amount of CO2 someone in the US would typically produce in about a month, that's everything from commuting to work to consuming food and watching TV, the company says it would cost around anywhere from $600 to nearly $900.
The target, of course, is to bring costs down, to bring the energy requirements down, and to make it easily scalable.
So Casas has been working on designing larger plants that would use renewable energy sources and require less steel. But one of the most promising ways to offset the cost has been tapping directly into the captured CO2. Climeworks stores the carbon dioxide it collects into these tanks. Then it sells it to this Coca-Cola factory that produces bottled water. Here, recycled carbon dioxide is injected in the water to make it fizzy.
30% of our production is done with the recycled CO2 from Climeworks.
Patrick Wittweiler oversees the carbon dioxide project at Coca-Cola. He says early on, there were challenges, like turning the carbon dioxide into the right kind of liquefied form.
We run a lot of tests and validations just to be sure that the quality remains on the highest level.
Wittweiler says using recycled CO2 is significantly more expensive than the commercial kind, but Coca-Cola is committed to lowering its environmental footprint. Over time, he expects the cost to diminish, and that would allow the company to expand the use of recycled CO2 from bottled water to other drinks like Coke.
We're testing it, and we look into further expansions.
Making drinks fizzy is just one way to use recycled CO2. Carbon capture startups have also been experimenting with creating fuel, toothpaste, and plastic. Climeworks also has another way to profit from the carbon it captures. The startup sells what it calls a carbon removal service, so that individuals or companies like Shopify and Audi can offset their own emissions.
You are flying to Mallorca, but I know it's not so good for the environment. I really want to compensate. You can buy carbon dioxide.
This part of the industry is booming and fast evolving as regulators and climate analysts debate how to best price this type of service.
There are better ways of capturing the carbon dioxide than they're using.
Sandra Kentish is a professor at the University of Melbourne who tracks and compares carbon capture systems around the world. She says it's harder to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere rather than a direct source of pollution.
The CO2 concentration in the atmosphere is only about 0.04%. Cement production, as an example, CO2 concentration's around 30%. So it's hundreds of times easier to capture from something like a cement flue gas than it will be directly from the atmosphere.
This inefficiency means that to capture 1% of the world's emissions in a year, Climeworks would have to build around 800,000 ventilators. But Casa says the company's technology can still make a difference.
Unfortunately, the mess is already here, so we need to take out CO2.
And Climeworks plans to take out more CO2 with a new facility in Iceland that was built with some funding from Microsoft. When it opens in September, the company says the plant will be able to absorb about 4 times more than its Swiss facility. But this time, the carbon dioxide won't be recycled. It'll be injected in the ground and turned into a rock.
These are these white crystals. So this CO2 is actual CO2 which was in the air.
And this kind of evolution is how Climeworks hopes its technology will become cheaper, so that it can clean the air for companies searching for new ways to reduce their own emissions.
So what better way to create mass genocide, right? You tell people that there's a climate problem. You start burning trees, which people, do need for oxygen, right? You start burning them all down, right? Then there's a lack of trees out there. Then you say, well, now we don't have any trees to absorb carbon dioxide, so we need to use machines, and we'll just suck it out of the air. So here's another excuse for us to make sure nobody out there is capable of planting food and making food on their own, because we know they're hell-bent on all of us not being able to live off-grid and live on our own, whether you're educated or not. And they know there's people like us who are planning on going off-grid, who might already be off-grid, who when crap hits the fan are not going to be dependent on them. They want to make sure everyone's dependent on them. That means that if you have your own farm, for example, not only do they want you to register your farm, of course, so that they can come and make it a community farm, but they want to make sure that you can't grow food, so that when everything is off, the Amish or anybody else who is used to living off-grid, who can farm for themselves and have water supply for themselves, won't be able to use it. So what better way to do it than to take the carbon dioxide out of the air so that plants can't grow, so that farmers can't make crops, and then we have to go to a laboratory where they're making what they call plant-based food, which is not really plant-based food, which is probably just filled with all sorts of fetuses and other things that they want you to eat, telling you that it's good for you and nutritional for you, just the same way that they tell us that meat is bad for us, when in reality, like I've said a million times, you don't have to eat meat, you don't have to love meat. This isn't a channel that's going to lecture you on being vegan or eating meat, but I will tell you this: if you want to lose weight, just cut carbs out and eat meat. I mean, it's pretty nutritious for you as long as you don't go crazy and get your cholesterol really high. But they tell you that meat's bad for you because they don't want you to be healthy. They want you dumbed down, weak, and filled with estrogen, which I've covered in the past with the plant-based foods, how they're pumped with estrogen, pumped with it. You have men who are growing breasts, right? And of course, isn't that what they want? Exactly, it is what they want. Baphomet, remember, one gender, there's no men anymore. The removal of men and the removal of women. So back to the topic here. We live in a time period that people are so stupid. The people who believe they're educated will still argue against this. They'll say that what I'm saying is a conspiracy, or they'll say what I'm saying doesn't make sense. But basic science tells us that plants need carbon dioxide, okay? They're talking about vacuuming all carbon out of the air. They're not specifically saying carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. They are pretty much hinting at carbon dioxide, but they're saying all carbon needs to be removed from the air, and we need to get to carbon zero, emission zero by 2050, right? By 2050, which means no carbon would be in the air. Isn't that what we would assume? That carbon emission zero, carbon zero means zero, right? So how would plants survive? They wouldn't. Which means we won't be able to grow food anymore. Which means that the only way you'll be able to eat is if you get the mark of the beast and you turn to Big Brother and you do as they say. Otherwise, you will suffer what some would consider the worst possible way to die, I mean, if you're not counting like lighting yourself on, getting set on fire or something, I would assume starvation is like the most painful way to go. Now, people can debate that all they want, but trust me, you don't want to die of starvation or dehydration. You start to lose your mind with dehydration, and starvation will be probably one of the most long, agonizing deaths you could possibly have. Just think of going like, you know, I know a lot of you out there fast. Not very easy to fast. It's easy to say, yes, it's easy to fast for God, but I mean, it takes a lot of discipline, right? Well, just imagine doing that for 30 days, not eating, right? And how your stomach would feel. So they want control completely over the food. So this is a way where idiots out there should wake up. They should go, wait a minute. And they should already be thinking about, you know, the carbon that they want to remove is us, right? The carbon footprint is us. They claim it's us because we breathe out, right? Carbon. So they want to get the carbon out of the air that we breathe out, right? So they want to obviously depopulate and kill us all. And what a better way to create mass genocide than to kill off all the plants by removing all the carbon from the air. Thus, we have a low level of oxygen being produced. You might say, well, how would they live? How do they survive? Don't worry about them. I mean, they've got bunkers and cities built underground where they plan on going, where they have food stashed and stored, where they have oxygen. They have everything that they need down there. And it's all on your tax time. That's what they've been doing the last 70 years, making sure that that's all prepared and ready to go. And here on the surface level, we're all going to be suffering. It's going to be fires. There's going to be all sorts of problems with the air. Obviously, that already exists with the aluminum and barium they're dumping on us from the sky, but it's just going to get worse and worse. And the amazing part about this is that they're doing this out in the open. They're telling you that they're going to put $1.2 billion of our tax money into sucking carbon out of the air that we need for plants by telling us that, well, we don't need to worry about plants. Screw the cattle, screw the chickens, let all the food supplies die off, because we need to make sure that we suck carbon out of the air, because we have to prevent these wildfires and the warming of the ice caps and all this stuff that they start and they create. They create all the fires with direct energy weapons. They create them on their own. And then they blame us for it, and they blame carbon for it. So people are going to go along with it because they're going to go, oh my goodness, you see this fire? Do you see the hurricanes in California? All these bizarre weather things, even though we know they have the ability to manipulate weather, all these events are happening. We got to do something about it. And their brains won't even think to wonder about plants and carbon dioxide and how they need it and how we need plants in order to breathe. It's insanity, utter insanity, that this is being discussed on the news as a good idea. Then, of course, as I always say, we connect the dots and it all leads back to Bill Gates. It all leads back to the World Economic Forum, the people who are promoting this and telling us that we need to do this. When will citizens' arrest be made? Now, I doubt that Bill's ever showing his face on this level again. I mean, most of the time when you see him, he's green screened because he knows he's an enemy of humanity. He should know by this point. It's amazing that they can roll him out, and there's liberals out there that watch and listen to him and believe what he says and think he's a wonderful guy. That's how psychopathic, or not a psychopath, I don't even know that's a word. That's how insane they are, that they listen to this psychopath who's telling you that we need to remove carbon, and then nobody thinks about the most basic things in the world, like photosynthesis, about plants and how we need plants to have oxygen and how we need plants to be able to grow food. Nope. None of that seems to register in people's minds because they're completely idiotic. So the Biden administration, which has been put in by design, okay, to do all of these insane things, and they're, like I've said, this is all by design. It doesn't mean that Biden is a complete old fart moron, because he is. But they put him and Kamala in so it looks believable when they do ridiculous things like this. They don't have to address it. They don't have to answer it. And then all Democrats are too distracted by Donald Trump and indictments and being afraid that he's a bully, he's going to come back into power, to actually use their brains and say, yeah, maybe it's not a good idea to suck carbon out of the air. Nope. They just go along with it, just like they're going to go along with the next potion that comes out in a few weeks. And they're going to go along with needing more mandates because they're completely insane. And they're just complete morons. They've all had permanent lobotomies. I guess all lobotomies are permanent, but they've all had lobotomies. There is nothing in their head. So this is what your government is doing with their tax money. They're literally killing us, plotting to kill us in the open, and nobody sees what's happening. Please share this video with other people. I've tried to make it as simple as possible that even a 5-year-old would understand what's going on here. I don't care what your politics are. How dumb can you be at this point? Wake up and snap out of it. Their goal is to kill us all. to depopulate. All the books they read, you know, in their I almost said the word, in the buildings that they meet in, right? The Babylonian Tau, ... These books, they all talk about killing us and depopulating and how we're cattle. And now they're actually doing it out in the open. They've done it before throughout human history. There's been, you know, Armenian genocides, there's been Christian genocides that they never mention, of course. Only one they mention is one that, you know, involves themselves because, of course, well, when you become a victim, nobody can ask questions, right? So they're doing this out in the open. People need to know about it. Share this video. Again, if you didn't hear, my website is the way to get to my website is now through through Uprising Revival. That's Uprising Revival. Okay, for anybody out there that's already joined, you know what the name of it is. I can't say it, but just go to Uprising Revival. It's linked below. Click on the link, join the website for $2.99 a month, and also click on free videos to get your email into an email list. That way we can all stay in touch with each other as things hit the fan. You'll have an understanding and awareness of where I am, and we'll all obviously be able to interact and communicate with one another, because the biggest thing they want to do is disconnect all of us from each other and keep us separated. That's one of the reasons they constantly take channels down and do all that stuff. Not that I would know about channels being removed, because I'm a new YouTuber. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks to the patrons for your support. It really helps me make content, more content, and I appreciate it. Thanks again, everybody. God bless all of you and your families.